Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. If you've spent any amount of time in internet gun space, you will hear a myriad of arguments over people debating the merits of various competitive shooting disciplines as it pertains to defensive application. Intuitively, you would think that IDPA would be the most applicable. It's got defensive right in the name. Of course, there are the qualms about it being the slowest to adopt appendix carry, things like that. The fact that there are some artificialities like you can only do slide lock reloads, yada yada. Then you have, of course, USPSA or EvoSec, and the criticisms there are that one is much more sort of gamer-oriented, higher round counts, all sorts of stuff. Kid doesn't have to be shot from concealment, all these sorts of things. And then you've got kind of the redheaded stepchild of Steel Challenge, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today, because I just shot my first Steel Challenge match on Sunday, and I have some thoughts. Now, I will say that someone who can speak on this with far more authority is my friend and my shooting coach, Kirk. He's done a couple of podcast appearances where he talks about the reasons why he thinks that Steel Challenge is a useful discipline for the defensive shooter. I'm going to touch on that briefly first, but I also want to bring in some of the additional context that I feel is relevant. When I took the Range Master Instructor course, one of the things that Tom Givens talked about was focusing not on the average civilian defensive encounter, but on the typical encounter. And the reason why that's important is because, to use his words, if you have one foot in a campfire and the other in a bucket of ice, well, on average, you're comfortable. But obviously, that's not the case in practice. So when you look at typical defensive encounters within the private sector, they tend to be relatively low round count at, relatively close distance. The analogy that Tom likes to use is something within a car's length is kind of what you are dealing with. And so when you look at the basics of Steel Challenge, they're relatively low round count, provided that you hit what you're aiming at. And the majority of the distances are, typically within that car's length, maybe a little bit further out on some of the stages, which again, kind of helps to check your accuracy at speed. But here's the thing that I really appreciate about it. When you look at the targets used in Steel Challenge, I mean, you've got these big, like, poster board suckers, and those are really the ones where you're just testing your raw speed ability more than anything else. There's not really a marksmanship challenge to those targets in particular. But the plates that are used are either a 10 or a 12-inch plate. And when you look at, like, the black of a B8, for example, or the preferred anatomical targeting, a 10 or a 12-inch circle is larger than what we would consider optimal anatomical hits. But when you compare it to the other games, while it's larger than the equivalent A zone or down zero on the USPSA and IDPA targets respectively, it's still considerably smaller than the C zone or the down one. And this is what I appreciate about that. It's binary. You either hit it or you didn't. There's no way to compromise lesser hits faster. You either made the hit or you didn't, and you are making the hits in the best time that you possibly can. But there's not the same ability to game, well, I'll take a C-zone hit half a second faster and move on to the next target. So there's less, there's less ways to kind of manipulate the scores, I guess. Now, I'm not by any means dogging on those other disciplines, because, you look at the guys that founded them, obviously they knew quite a bit about defensive pistol craft. And, even guys like the one that's coming to mind most recently is Matt Little. He just put his book out, The Way is in Training. Dude's got some real been there, done that creds, and he's a big proponent of competition shooting. Mike Green, who I'm fortunate to consider a friend, same deal. And so I'm not saying that one is necessarily, truly superior to the other, but I think that there are some merits to Steel Challenge shooting that don't necessarily present themselves in the other disciplines. The other thing is, like I said, it's a relatively low round count thing. You run every stage 5 times. So if you've got perfect runs, you're only dealing with 25 rounds per stage. So you're looking at maybe 3 boxes of ammo for the course of a day. The matches tend to be shorter too, which is nice. You're not having to dedicate an entire freaking day to the thing. The one that I shot, we were wrapped by about 1 in the afternoon. And the other cool part is you can shoot rimfire. It's very accessible, and so you don't necessarily have to have a bunch of gear in order to shoot it. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, because like I said, I'm definitely a little biased, and because somebody that I'm relatively close to was a driving factor in me pursuing this. But I mean, like, I'd shot some outlaw matches at another local range, and I mean, they were okay, but it wasn't as fun. Now, I will concede, when I was shooting the other matches, I was not at the skill level that I'm at now, and admittedly, in the earlier part of this year, I had a couple of what I consider some fairly significant breakthroughs in my shooting. So I'm going to revisit and try my hand again at USPSA and an IDPA match or 2. But I do think that if you have the opportunity to shoot Steel Challenge, or, like in my instance, it just happens to be the most accessible shooting competition available to you, go for it. It's kind of like it's kind of like combat sports. You can debate the merits of wrestling versus boxing versus Muay Thai versus Jiu-Jitsu. Just pick one and go with it and spend some real time with it and see how the skills develop from there. Have you shot Steel Challenge before? I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts and your experiences. What do you think of my take? Because, especially within sort of the gun cognoscenti space, and Caleb, that's how you say that, cognoscenti, is that, USPSA is kind of the golden child. It's where kind of the highest level of competition sits. And so that's where people really kind of go to test their mettle, understandably. But does some of that detract from, is there so much there to contend with that it takes a little bit more sifting to get to the useful parts of the game for my purposes? Because I don't shoot competition to try and win. I shoot competition to get more time under pressure with as close to my carry gear as I can reasonably manage. That's another critique for Steel Challenge particularly, is that all their holster rigs have to be outside the waistband. Okay, cool. I can practice my concealment draw in the comfort of my own home in the air conditioning and not in 108 degree heat index. So the live fire piece, especially target transitioning at speed, the neighbors get a little pinchy when I try and do that at home. So what do you guys think? Like I said, do you have a preferred shooting sport? And have you tried Steel Challenge? What were your impressions of it? I want to hear all that down in the comments below. And outside of that, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Stay dangerous and stay sharp.